world will last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music get you high, and when it's said and done,
To all romantic couples, man and woman, two men, two women, do you tell each other clearly what turns you on and what turns you off in making love? Some people may want the other person to bite their nipples or another part of the body during sex, but not I. I want no bites. I want body pleasure, not pain. Some people consider the asshole dirty and do not want to lick it. I'm glad to lick the asshole of a healthy, clean man if he and I are attracted to each other. My friend Steve here in Albuquerque gave me that wonderful pleasure many years ago, and I learned from him to enjoy licking the assholes of certain men over the years. A doctor told me mouths have more germs than assholes. Who would have guessed? Couples, if the other person is tired, feeling sick, not in the mood, for whatever reason, do you accept their not now without pressuring them, without pouting or begging? Are you free to tell each other when you're sexually attracted to some other person and why? Maybe even enjoy guessing which persons in a crowd your partner finds attractive. Are you both learning that romance for many couples is not a cage, not a chain? Many people openly and honestly are in love and make love with more than one person at the same time in their lives. Couples, are you free to share with each other your sexual histories, honestly? The lessons you've learned, good and bad, from your family about sex and your sex with yourself and with other people. Do you welcome any questions from your partner about sex? If a man or woman loves hot sex, is he or she attracted to only one person in their life? I've never met such a person who is attracted to only one person in their life if they really treasure hot sex. My dear friends Bob and Alberta lived in the town of Freeport, Illinois, 6 miles from the farm where I grew up. When I became close friends with them, they were an older couple. They had a business in their home. Many people, including my parents, went to them to renew state licenses for cars and trucks. And most people in that town never knew the sex lives of this ordinary-looking, older, white couple. Bob told me if the people of that town knew how he felt on sex and on politics, he would be run out of town. Bob was for justice and equality for black people, for women, for poor people. Bob was against U.S. wars. Bob and Alberta were open and honest with each other about their sex with other people. Little or no jealousy. They had 2 bisexual male friends. Alberta got turned on seeing those 2 bisexual men have sex. And seeing her turned on turned Bob on. Bob copied some gay sex tapes for me. Bob invited me to come watch his straight sex videos with him. He said he could watch the beautiful women and I could watch the handsome men. Bob had sex with other women, including a Catholic nun friend there in town. I still have and Alberta had sex with other men. I still have a cassette tape that Bob gave me maybe 25 years ago, a conversation he and Alberta had in bed as they had sex. Bob was asking Alberta about the sex she had had with a hot young man shortly before. And hearing how turned on Alberta was in sex with that hot young man turned Bob on. He kept asking her questions to get her to tell more. And one special man Alberta had sex with, she made a popsicle from some of his cum. She kept the popsicle in their freezer, and she would take it out sometimes and suck on it as she thought of that man. The men and women Bob and Alberta had sex with were their friends, not strangers. I wish I could remember all Bob told me about their sex lives. Bob died at 94 in 2005. Alberta died over 14 years earlier. They were married 48 years when she died. Alberta was Bob's number 1 woman. After her death from cancer, Bob found no woman as special as Alberta. They both were very kind and generous to me. They lived not in Paris, not in New York City, but Freeport, Illinois, a town of 20-some thousand people, and their sexual adventures happened in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. So if you see an ordinary-looking older couple of any color, do not assume that you know what goes on sexually behind closed doors. Most people who knew them had no idea what went on sexually behind their closed doors. Bob and Alberta were far more sexually liberated than many uptight, jealous young couples today. Bob and Alberta were far more sexually liberated than the many married women and men who have sex with other people, but sadly, they deny, they lie like crazy to each other. Many times my mother had me go into our town's candy stores to buy boxes of candy as a gift. Did she fully realize that sugar is slow poison? Did I fully realize then that sugar is slow poison? Hell no. And when I went into the Union Dairy there in Freeport, Illinois, and bought ice cream cones for her and me, brought them out to the car, and we gobbled them down, and bought quarts of ice cream to take home, did I fully realize how she would suffer severely and die from kidney disease? Did I realize how I would lose my teeth, how I would suffer 23 holes and weak spots in my retinas of my eyes, causing surgery when I was 28 because of my severe addiction to sugar and other junk food? One of many damn lies some parents tell their young sons is men don't cry. Sadly, those boys often grow up to deny their feelings of sadness by violence as gang members or cops or soldiers or in their families raising hell. Their sadness turns into awful rage, fits of hellish rage instead of healing orgasms of tears of love and sadness. One man who was beaten by his dad when he was a boy made up his mind then to show no feeling, no tears, to keep his dad from getting satisfaction in beating him. As an adult man, he now is not able to show feeling. He knows people may think he is cold and heartless, but he says they have no idea what goes on inside him. He has deep feelings, but learned long ago not to show those feelings. We need to remember not to judge a book by its cover. I love my tears of love and sadness. I treasure my tears. Men, be careful how much you lift. We men, I guess much more than women, can cause hernias in our groin if we lift too much, too often. I had small hernias on both sides, right and left, 35 years ago. And maybe 18 years or so ago, a very attractive bisexual black surgeon visited me at my home. And I had him look at my hernias. And he told me, now get this was a surgeon speaking. He told me, if they don't bother you, leave them alone. I like that, especially coming from a surgeon, because I greatly fear surgeries. I fear needles. I fear knives and pain. But in the last year or so, my right hernia has become much larger than it was. Fortunately, so far, it is not painful, but that could change any time. Exercise alone is not enough to be healthy. We need to eat only healthy food, raw plant foods. Jim Fixx, that's Fixx, Jim Fixx, wrote one of the most popular books on exercise called The Complete Book of Running. It was on bestseller lists for almost 2 years in the late 1970s. Until his mid-30s, Jim Fixx smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day and weighed 220 pounds. But at 35, he stopped smoking, and soon he was running 80 miles a week, including marathons. He lost all his fat, but sadly, he did not change his diet much. In his book, Fixx, and his book again, The Complete Book of Running, in his book, Fixx quoted a doctor who said any non-smoker fit enough to run a marathon in less than 4 hours would never suffer a fatal heart attack. But that was wrong. Jim Fixx's father had died at 43 from a heart attack, and Jim Fixx believed that running every day and not smoking would protect him from a heart attack. But the nation's leading advocate on the health benefits of running, this man, Jim Fixx, tragically died of a massive heart attack while running. He was only 52, and later it was found in the autopsy 3 of his coronary arteries were more than 70% blocked, and 1 artery was 99% blocked. Exercise is wonderful. Exercise is necessary for health, but it cannot make up for eating unhealthy shit. We need vigorous exercise, and we need only healthy food. For years, many years, I've had a small trampoline, 40 inches in diameter, with heavy-duty springs that seldom break. For years, I used it most days. But for many months, I foolishly stopped jumping on the trampoline. Of course, on many days, I walked many blocks. But I should have stayed on the trampoline also on many days. I started again the day before this past Christmas. And now I aim to do it regularly most days when I am taking no long walks. Jumping 45 minutes or less, and not necessarily all at once, but during the day, some earlier, some later, whatever. Jumping on a trampoline is a total body exercise, strengthening every cell of the body. Jumping on a trampoline is low impact, much easier on the joints of our ankles, our hips, our knees, than running on hard cement. Jumping on a trampoline is the best exercise for our lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system is the trash collector of our bodies. The heart pumps the blood, but the lymphatic system has no special organ to pump the lymph fluid. Enough exercise is what pumps the lymph fluid, and especially jumping to pump that lymph fluid, to get rid of the waste and the poisons from our cells. The lymph lymphatic system removes the toxins, the dead cells, the cancer cells, the bad bacteria, the infectious viruses, the heavy metals, and other junk from our cells of our bodies. Sadly, many years ago, when my mother got very fat, she got very little exercise. And of course, the bigger she got, the harder it was to move her body. So her lymphatic system wasn't removing the poisons. Her legs became massive. They hurt her like hell. And every step became work. She suffered that way for years. She worked long hours as a secretary in our family business, sometimes from 8 or 9 in the morning till 8 or 9 at night. And she was a conscientious, honest, capable secretary. But sadly, that was mostly sitting. And too much sitting is as deadly as smoking cigarettes. Jumping on a trampoline reduces mental stress. Jumping on a trampoline slows aging. Doesn't stop aging, but it slows aging. Jumping on a trampoline helps lose fat and tones muscles. Jumping on a trampoline protects against cancer, against heart disease. Put on some music or a worthwhile radio or TV program as you jump. Jumping on a trampoline helps learning disabled children. If you really want to eat healthy, live healthy, get rid of all the packaged, canned, bottled, slow poison, processed crap in your house. Absolutely no sodas, no booze, no damn chips of any kind. Because if you don't have it around, you can't eat it if you get the urge. Get rid of all the fast food and all the factory fake foods containing added sugar, artificial sweeteners, processed vegetable oils, corn oil, soybean oil, peanut oil, etc. These oils often have been heated to high temperatures, good stuff taken out, bad stuff added. I have none of that shit in my one rented room home. I've learned not to have many avocados at home because they're too tempting for me. Avocados are very nutritious, very delicious, and I love them. And they have healthy fat, good fat. But too much fat, even raw, healthy fat, is not good for many people. So most days now I eat 2 small avocados or 1 large one, sometimes more. But never, if you want to be healthy, if you want to be lean and not fat, never eat cooked fat of any kind. Cooked fat clogs up the blood, the arteries, the lymphatic system. Cooked fat often makes people fat. Eating only raw plant fats, avocados, seeds, nuts, not roasted seeds and nuts, raw seeds and nuts that aren't salted, can help lose fat. Because raw plant fats have enzymes which cause body fat to be burned. Every one of us is capable of terrifying violence. Every one of us is capable of murder in a moment of insane rage. Every one of us is also capable of marvelous compassion, wonderful good. And we need to always see the evil around us, in our world, and within us. But we need to concentrate mainly on the good around us and the good within us. It's better, a million times better, to light a candle than to curse the darkness. Violence is a terrible human problem, not just a male problem. Violence is a terrible problem of both men and women. No one is born evil. If we think of persons who have hurt us the most, if we think of persons who have committed huge atrocities in the past and present, if I had suffered the childhoods they suffered, if I had suffered the poison influences they later suffered in life, if I had not had the many people who have taught me, who have loved me, who have inspired me, I might have committed the same evils they committed. With much help from each other, we can wake up, we can turn from evil to good. In June 1994, Dr. Robert Wilner from Florida, who was in town here in Albuquerque for a conference, he was guest on my 2-hour live call-in TV program on Channel 27. Dr. Robert Wilner was absolutely convinced that HIV does not cause AIDS. He knew AIDS was real, and people suffered like dogs, suffered hell from AIDS, but that HIV was not the cause. And live on camera, he pricked his finger to draw blood, and then he pricked the finger of a young HIV-positive man from here whom he had never met before that evening. Dr. Wilner put the young man's HIV-positive blood on his own blood on his finger where he had pricked his finger. And before he did it on my program in June 1994, 27 and a half years ago, he had done the same thing in Spain with someone else. And he was covered by the 4th largest news service in the world. And Dr. Wilner gave me a pre-publication copy of his book, gave it to me free, and it was later published, and you can get it free through interlibrary loan. Several libraries across the country have the book, entitled Deadly Deception: The Proof That Sex and HIV absolutely do not cause AIDS. AIDS is not caused by the HIV virus. Testing positive for HIV does not mean the person will die of AIDS. Drugs, both pharmacy drugs and heroin, cocaine, and other street drugs, can cause AIDS. Testing positive for HIV causes some people extreme stress, intense fear, making them sick. Now, severe stress can take a terrible toll on us. And if they test positive for HIV and they think that's a death sentence, well, that very fear can make them very sick. The main drug for years to treat AIDS was AZT. AZT causes AIDS. The drug company Burroughs Wellcome made millions of dollars from AZT and from poppers, amyl nitrite. And most gay men in big U.S. cities in the 1990s sniffed poppers, a popular inhalant for a sexual rush. And poppers never caught on much among lesbians. And AIDS never became a very serious problem among lesbians. And thankfully, many lesbians reached out and helped generously their gay friends who were dying of AIDS. Poppers, amyl nitrite, caused the cancer Kaposi sarcoma, one of the conditions called AIDS. So this filthy rich drug company, Burroughs Wellcome, made millions off the very popular poppers and off AZT prescribed by many doctors for people testing positive for HIV. Now, of course, many of those doctors who prescribed AZT felt they were doing the right thing. They were sincere. But being sincere doesn't necessarily make anybody right on anything. And both poppers and AZT cause AIDS, severe illness. AZT is highly poisonous. It has 56 side effects. 56 side effects. Not one of the thousands of scientific papers written proves scientifically that HIV causes AIDS. Not one of the thousands of scientific papers. Poppers, cigarettes, booze, prescribed drugs, the crap most people in the U.S. eat, containing severely processed vegetable oils, pesticides, sugar, not enough vitamins, not enough minerals, not enough fiber. And then, of course, also not enough sleep, not enough exercise, not enough raw vegetables and fruit, not enough sunshine, poison chemicals in the home and workplace and in drinking water, all of them are hell on the immune system. AIDS has many causes. It doesn't have just one cause. Any combination of what I just read can cause AIDS. And also feeling guilt and shame for being gay. As many gay men brought up in small towns and on farms, in religious families, and fearing going to hell and not being accepted by one's own family for being gay, for being who you are. All of that takes a toll on the immune system. Sadly, many people used AIDS to curse men having sex with men. Many religious people claimed AIDS was God's punishment for men having sex with men. Insane bullshit. And some doctors lost their licenses because they refused to kill their patients with AZT. AIDS is actually a group of 25 old diseases with a new name, AIDS. My dear friend here, Roberto, died at 31 with AIDS. He had sniffed spray paint for many years. He drank booze. He ate junk food. He suffered the disappearance of his mother when he was in 6th grade. Her body was never found. And after her disappearance, he was sent to live with his uncle who beat him. My dear friend Roberto, before I knew him, was locked up in a juvenile detention facility. He suffered religious guilt because of his sex with other males. He suffered some shame and rejection from his family, who did not accept his sex with males. Roberto's tragic death with AIDS at 31 in 1999 had many, many causes. I strongly recommend the book, What If Everything You Thought You Knew About AIDS Was Wrong, by Christine Maggiore. And this book is in our city library. In fact, this is a copy from the city library. And she tells of many times in medical history when the popular consensus of medical doctors and others was wrong. One thing, I guess, that she didn't mention here, as some of you may know, many doctors over 100 years ago said that masturbation caused many diseases. And those doctors said slicing off part of the baby boy's cock would cure masturbation and prevent the many diseases caused by masturbation. What crazy bullshit. But many doctors believed it, and they preached it. And Christine Maggiore says, throughout history, the medical and scientific communities have been in near unanimous agreement on causes and treatments for diseases that turned out to be absolutely wrong. Mass consensus on incorrect theories have often impeded vital research, delayed the development of cures or effective therapies for many conditions, and cost countless lives. Many people died. A number of medical protocols once deemed the standard of care have later proved to be harmful, even deadly. For example, the 1899 edition of the Merck Manual, which is a prestigious medical text physicians worldwide regard as their Bible. It's still being published yearly. But the 1899 edition officially recommends poisons such as arsenic, ether, chloroform, turpentine oil, mercury, strychnine as treatment for anemia, constipation, earaches, and headaches. Before modern-day doctors agreed that exposure to X-rays and other forms of radiation caused genetic damage and cancers, radiation was routinely administered for tonsillitis, for acne, for ringworm, for enlarged lymph glands, and enlarged thymus glands. In the 19th century, in England, scurvy was a terrible disease, and Many medical doctors and the people assumed that it was some contagious microbe, but the actual cause of scurvy was not enough vitamin C. Beriberi in the late 1800s in the Far East. Many medical people believed that it was caused by a contagious microbe, but the real cause was a deficiency of thiamine, a B vitamin. Maternal fever in the 1900s in U.S. and Europe. Medical people thought that it was not contagious. But the actual cause later was doctors using unsanitary medical practices. In other words, like if a doctor performed, if a doctor was working with a patient that had a contagious disease and then went in to deliver a baby and didn't wash his or her hands, the mothers often got very sick. Probably some of them died. The ignorance. In 1918, the flu epidemic in the U.S. and Europe, many medical people believed that it was caused by bacteria, but the actual cause was a virus. Pellagra in the 1920s in the U.S. and Europe. Many medical professionals believed it was caused by a contagious microbe, but the real cause was niacin deficiency, not enough of that B vitamin, niacin. SMON in the 1960s and 70s in Japan, medical people, many of them thought it was caused by a new virus, but it was actually caused by a pharmaceutical drug. A synthetic hormone given in the 1950s to prevent miscarriages in pregnant women was later found to cause cervical cancer and sterility in the daughters of women who used it. Thalidomide, a popular sleeping aid prescribed, was banned later after it caused limb deformities in many babies born to women who took the drug. During the 1960s and 70s, an entire epidemic was caused by a widely used prescription medicine for diarrhea. For 15 years, doctors and scientists blamed a virus for the sudden outbreak of a new intestinal disorder and gave suffering patients the very drug that was the cause of their illness. By the time a minority view was considered and the drug responsible for the epidemic was finally banned, thousands had died. Many victims were left paralyzed or blind. Question everyone. Question me. Question medical doctors. Question religion. Question government. Question. Always question. And then in her book, What If Everything You Thought You Knew About AIDS Was Wrong? She shares over 30 testimonies of people who did not swallow the idea that once you are tested positive for HIV, you're going to get AIDS and you're going to die. They did not swallow that shit. And Ed Lieb from New York says, I've known over 200 people who died of so-called AIDS. Every one of them had sufficient drug abuse or medical terrorism to account for their immune suppression. When I was told on January 7th, 1988, that I was HIV positive, I had about 2 years to live, it came as a complete shock to me because I did not have a history of what was considered high-risk behavior. And what came as a bigger shock than testing positive was learning that no one was interested in investigating any natural cures. What it boiled down to was, if it wasn't a drug, they didn't want to know about it. And by 1992, I had learned enough to convince me that AIDS was the greatest medical error of all time. As I write this, says Ed Lieb of New York, it has been 11 years since I first got tested. I've never developed any AIDS-defining illnesses. In fact, I haven't had a cold in 19 years. I ride a bicycle for transportation all year round. I take no medications, no medical treatments, no vitamins or herbal supplements, just good food and 10 minutes a day of exercise for the immune system. And he says, had I listened to the doctors in 1988, I wouldn't be here today. And now in my mid-50s, I have a better body than I've ever had in my life. Most of my friends are close to half my age. HIV cost me a lot. I lost my income, my savings, a lot of friends. I thank God that I was smart enough to just say no to the doctors, so it didn't cost me my health. If anything, as a result of what I learned, I'm healthier today than I've ever been. And then from a woman in Denver, Chris Chamel, I was required by law to take an HIV test in June of 1995. The test is mandatory in Colorado for pregnant women. I was expecting my second child. I was shocked when the results came back positive because I'd been married and monogamous for 9 years. My situation became even more incomprehensible when my husband and daughter tested negative. I realized my only risk was a blood transfusion I had 21 years before the HIV test. And even though I had been healthy for 2 decades, I didn't question what I was told. My intuition told me not to take the AZT that doctors said would cut the chance of me giving HIV to my baby. They finally wore me down. I started taking AZT in my 5th month of pregnancy. And after 10 months on AZT, I was sick all the time. I had constant diarrhea, nausea, fevers, night sweats, totally exhausted. I felt like I had a horrible flu that wouldn't go away. I kept developing infections. I was crawling to the bathroom, vomiting for hours. My doctors told me HIV was making me ill, that the virus had mutated into a form that was resistant to AZT, and that I had to go on more drugs to stay alive. And 2 months after adding 3-TC, another drug, to my treatment regimen, my skin started turning yellow with jaundice. I know that drugs cause jaundice because my father had died of liver failure from heart medicines. And since it was clear that the drugs were not keeping me from getting AIDS and were actually destroying my liver, I let my prescription run out. I figured I'd rather die from AIDS than liver failure. And almost immediately after I stopped taking my medicines, within just a matter of days, I started feeling much better. I had more energy. I wasn't feeling sick. And several months later, all my symptoms disappeared. I haven't been sick since that. I don't think I was ever sick with AIDS. I think I had AZT poisoning. I am glad that I never gave my daughter Rachel the liquid AZT I was supposed to put in her bottle. And then from a man in California, I was diagnosed HIV positive in the 1980s, immediately went into 3 years of complete denial. I never talked about it, did nothing about it. And finally, the media campaign, HIV equals AIDS equals death, got to me and decided it was time to go to an HIV doctor. My T-cell count was 900. Viral load tests were not available then. The doctor put me on AZT and other drugs. I never questioned the doctor. And after approximately 2 years of taking those drugs, my stomach started getting bloated. I had diarrhea every day. My friend Aaron told me to stop taking those drugs, that they were poison. But I thought he was crazy. Aaron then invited me to attend a meeting in West Hollywood in 1995 where Dr. Peter Duesberg was a speaker. It was too much for me to take it in all at once, but one thing stuck in my brain. Dr. Duesberg, a Nobel candidate, affirms that HIV is not the cause of AIDS. He closes his testimony with, I've been HIV positive and AIDS free for over 10 years. Now when I have a health problem, I treat the problem and not HIV. I'm very in tune with my immune system. I no longer count my T cells or my virus load. And from a man in Ohio, I've been HIV positive for 16 years. I'm a writer and performer. And in my work, I emphasize survival and self-determination over the usual death and medical dependency associated with HIV. It's not like I want to second-guess the medical profession, but I have to go with what I know in my heart. In the fall of 1996, I came down with PCP pneumonia, one of the hallmark AIDS diseases. I was scared. And this was when the cocktail drugs first started coming out, so I decided to try them. I also took drugs for the pneumonia, but when it cleared up, I stopped and just stayed on the cocktail. I felt awful. Here I was, a vegetarian who never even took aspirin, and all of a sudden I'm on all these powerful drugs. I had to take pills 3 or 4 times a day, some with meals, some without. My whole life revolved around drugs. I was all bloated, kept breaking out into rashes. I had to keep getting up through the night, go to the bathroom, so I was always exhausted. I had horrible neuropathy in my feet to the point where I could hardly walk. I felt my body falling apart, not from HIV, but from the damn drugs. I was always very aware of my body. I could feel that I was putting poison into it. I finally went to my doctors. I told them I didn't want to take the drugs anymore. They called me a fool. They were very dramatic, told me it was suicide to stop. So instead of stopping, I went on a new combination of drugs. My speech was slurred. I kept losing my balance. And when I fell down a flight of stairs at my house, that was the last straw. I just stopped taking them. My T cells went down, my viral load went up, but I felt healthy again. And 2 years after quitting the treatment, I feel better than ever. From a man in Mexico who is a doctor, Juan Jose Flores Rodriguez, and a medical doctor and PhD in Veracruz. He says, I had been involved with the treatment of AIDS for over 10 years. I treated patients diagnosed with HIV that belonged to the lowest economic strata. Their inability to afford the drugs, they didn't have the money, kept me from giving them AZT, which was expensive. As time went by, I began to see that the rich HIV-positive patients died, while the poor ones lived and continued to do so. My questions about this situation were answered when my son, Alejandro Flores, sent me the book Inventing the AIDS Virus by Dr. Peter Duesberg. And he says, using my new knowledge, so far I have treated 19 HIV positive and 1 HIV negative persons, all of them males between the ages of 19 and 44. All patients suffered from malnutrition. They didn't have the right nutrients put into their body, and they belonged to the middle or lower economic class. 8 of these patients were treated with antiretrovirals such as AZT, given to them by the state health agencies. And during their treatment with AZT and the other damn drugs, these people showed the typical symptoms: fever, weight loss, diarrhea, pulmonary or lung infections. They also suffered from depression due to stigma of believing they had to die, enduring social ostracization, and from unkind treatment by their families and others. And Dr. Juan Jose Flores, there in Veracruz, Mexico, says, the protocol that I gave them involved stopping the drug cocktails, no more AZT, stopping the antibiotics, stopping the antidepressants, stopping the antidiarrheals, and following a strict diet. Get off all the damn drugs and eat healthy. Between 2 weeks and 2 months after beginning my protocol, the patients began to get better. Their symptoms began disappearing in this order: diarrhea, weight loss, pulmonary infections, and depression. In closing, Dr. Flores Rodriguez says, I would like to let those people who suffer the stigma of an HIV-positive diagnosis know that there are scientists that are willing to fight for the truth. You deserve to live. Good night.
Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music get you high, and when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine on. And when it's said